Roll call.
Dunstan here.
Grillo here.
Bukavich here.
Skibidi here.
Guzikowski here. Crowell here.
Seifert here.
Chandler here.
And Dickman's excused. Item 2 is minutes of the January 24th, 2017 meeting.
Seifert moves to approve the minutes of January 24th, 2017 meeting.
Guzikowski will second.
Guzikowski seconds. Roll call.
Dunstan aye.
Grillo aye.
Bukavich aye.
Skibidi, aye.
Guzikowski aye. Crowell abstains.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler aye.
Item 3 is significant common council actions. Carrie.
Council approved the following: an ordinance for a conditional use permit for We Energy's select electrical substation with communications pole located on a portion of the property at 10861 South Howell Avenue. A resolution redesignating the roadway through Lake Vista Park and the portion of East Ryan Road east of South Fifth Avenue to Lake Vista Parkway and Lake Vista Boulevard. A resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to enter into a contract with Vanderwall and Associates for the preparation of project plans for an amendment to tax incremental district number 6 and the creation of tax incremental district number 13. A resolution approving the finance development agreement with Emerald Row 2 LLC and Emerald Row Holdings. Resolution authorizing the submittal of a Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation site assessment grant application for the property commonly known as the Bioversal property. And a resolution approving a memorandum of understanding between the City of Oak Creek and HSI Commercial Real Estate and/or Assigns. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Moving on to 4A, new business, under new business, a sign plan review of a proposed sign plan submitted by Kristen Peterson, Innovative Signs, Inc. for the Potbelly commercial tenant portion of the building at 160 West Town Square Way. Tax key number 813-9046.
All right,
Pete.
thank you. As you said, the applicant is requesting approval for a sign plan for the tenant space at 160 West Town Square Way. The applicant is Potbelly Sandwich Shop. As you are familiar with Drexel Town Square, all sign plans have to be reviewed and approved by the Plan Commission prior to submitting building permits. In your report, refer to the appendix of the criteria. The ones that I'll be applying tonight is the fact that you're allowed one primary sign per entry facade. You have one eye-level sign per every 12 linear feet of tenant space. And in this particular case is an outlot building which has a special facade facing Drexel, and they have the opportunity to have an additional wall sign facing Drexel Avenue. Up on the screen right now is the one of two wall signs that are being proposed on the north and south elevations of the tenant space. It'll be 28.875 inches tall by 155 inches wide, overall being a square footage of 31.26 square feet, which is within zoning requirements for the zoning district. Also, they will be having some eye-level signs. We'll skip that, we'll come back to that one. Here on this elevation on the left-hand side showing front store elevation, they have two examples. I'll blow up the graphic. They have a total of 31 feet of tenant space. So by the formula, they're allowed two eye-level signs. Right now, they're showing 3 eye-level signs. I did talk to the applicant and explain to them what the rules are for DTS. They're fine with that, only having 2. So the way the rule would be is that, once again, we don't regulate content, so it's going to be a sign plan that's going to allow for 2 entry facade signs, not to cover more than 10% of the glazing on the entry facade. So those are what is being proposed tonight. There also is a wall sign, or not a wall sign, but for the monument sign that was approved back when this building, the site plan was done. They're looking to put in a panel identifying their Potbelly Sandwich Shop, which is in compliance with the zoning code. Lastly, which is included in your report, is an elevation showing a illuminated eye-level sign. I spoke with the applicant and explained to them that this is actually going to be on the east side of the tenant space, which is not an entry level or an entry facade. So a sign variance will have to be granted. It just was part of their overall sign package. They will be coming at a later date, likely for a sign appeal, looking for a sign, eye-level sign on a non-entry facade. So tonight, if the Plan Commission is comfortable with what is being proposed with the sign plan, the applicant can be approved tonight to have one wall sign both on the north and south elevation of the tenant space, and be able to display two eye-level signs on the south elevation, not to make more than 10% of the glazing opaque, and then also install the one panel sign on the existing monument sign. Having said all that, staff recommends that the Plan Commission approves the sign plan submitted by Kristen Peterson, Potbelly Sandwich Shop, for the commercial tenant portion of the property at 160 West Town Square Way, allowing the following 1 through 4. Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Pete. I'll open up to the commission for questions or comments. Chauncey?
Okay, just for clarity on the quantity of signs, so there's a request for 2 entrance signs on the south and north, is that correct?
No.
No, okay.
They're looking for, under staff recommendation and report, they'll be looking for approval to have one 31 square foot sign on the north elevation, which is their non-entry, which faces Drexel Avenue. And then they'll also have one on the south elevation, which is their entry facade. So there'll be 2 wall signs like you normally see for a tenant space. There'll also be 2 eye-level signs that'll be allowed on the south elevation, which is their entry level, which not to exceed that 10% glazing. And then the fourth one is the sign panel that is on the monument sign.
So where are the internally illuminated signs?
That is not part of this approval. That was part of their overall sign package. I explained to them that that was not on an entry facade, therefore it would not be able to be approved tonight, but however, they could come at a later date to ask for a sign appeal, and that may happen down the road.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Commissioner Carrillo?
On this page labeled V11, where the chalkboard sign and the promotional, and so my question would be like the store name and hours that be applied to the door?
Yep, that would be one of the eye-level signs.
Okay, and is this an example, or is this going to be?
This is an example of what the content could be. Again, once again, we can't
Right.
regulate the look or the design, but we can regulate the size and the number.
Okay.
And so that's what is being requested to be approved as part of their sign plan, that they would be to have the 2 eye-level signs.
And the promotional one, where would that?
All 3 are examples of what the eye-level signs could look like.
Okay.
Then in the elevation, they showed a dotted box. They
Okay.
figured that, it would help the Plan Commission see what it is that they would be possibly proposing, but this isn't exactly what is going to be shown up on the south elevation at the eye level.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Chauncey.
I have a question for the applicant.
Come on up. Come up to the podium, name and address for the record. And welcome.
Kristen Peterson from Innovative Signs.
Pull the mic up a little bit. Thank you.
Sorry. Kristen Peterson, Innovative Signs.
Okay.
Just a question about the 2 eye-level signs. Can you give us a little more information on the signs?
At this point, they don't know exactly what they're going to be putting up there. These were some possible suggestions. It just depends on, what they're advertising at the particular time. So,
So are you saying these signs will change regularly? Am I understanding correctly?
the vinyl lettering, they can change it quarterly. So it would be depending on what the special would be.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Nobody else? Motion on 4A.
Carl moves the Plan Commission approves the sign plan submitted by Kristen Peterson, Potbelly Sandwich Shop, for the commercial tenant portion of the property at 160 West Town Square Way, allowing the following: 131.26 square foot, 28.875 tall wall sign in the north elevation. 2, 131.26 square foot, 28.875 tall wall sign on the south elevation. 3, 2 eye-level signs not to make up more than 10% of the glazing opaque on the south elevation. And 4, 1 sign panel to the existing monument sign.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Johnston, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Scabidi, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Carl, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
You're good. Thanks for coming in. How are you, sir? All right, next up is 4B. It's a rezone conditional use permit request submitted by Gregory Thompson, Storage Shop USA, Oak Creek LLC, to rezone the properties located at 331 and 401 East Oak Street from RS2 residential to M1 manufacturing with a conditional use permit for a commercial storage condominium development, tax key numbers 733-0008 and 733-0009. Pete?
Thank you. As the mayor stated, that the applicant is requesting the properties at 331 and 401 East Oak Street to be changed from RS2 single-family residential to M1 manufacturing with a conditional use for the operation of a contractor's office, shops, and yards without outdoor storage. Back on January 3rd, the Common Council approved an amendment to the comp plan that helped change the land use for this area to go from planned office to planned industrial, which then allowed the applicant to come back to ask for the rezone and conditional use to have this contractor's, not yard per se, but that rent to own, not rent to own is, condominium, kind of a very unique situation, the Storage USA shop that is being planned. The way it looks in your packet, I have some elevations showing what these storage hobby office type businesses will look like. Typically, this type of development will have space for small businesses, contractors, hobbyists. Included in your report was the applicant given a list of the type of businesses that could possibly be there. In this area, the parcels along Oak Street have variable zoning districts. We have I-1, RS2, institutional, and manufacturing. So at this point, in order for the applicant to be able to have this type of operation on the site, a rezone needs to be done to M1, as well as a conditional use to allow for this type of use at the site. So at this point, this is the determination where the Plan Commission will have to determine whether this location is a suitable site for this type of business. Staff recommends that the Plan Commission recommends that the Common Council approve the rezoning and conditional use permit for a contractor's office, shops, and yards with no outdoor storage for the properties at 331 and 401 East Oak Street after a public hearing and subject to conditions and restrictions that will be prepared for the Commission's review at the next meeting.
Thanks, Pete. I had one comment form that wants to speak to this one. Is that you? In the back? I'm guessing because you live on Oak Street. You didn't write the number down, but I figured that was you. Name and address for the record.
Frank Pazalensik, 611 East Oak Street.
Lucia?
The only question I have, changing it to M1, are you going to permit all the mini warehouses to become residential too?
Are we going to put all mini warehouses to become residential?
Right.
No.
Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. That's easy. Anyone else on that one? I got a stack of these, so I just want to make sure I'm not missing somebody. Good? All right. Questions or comments from the commission? Motion. Oh, Alderman Bekavich.
Just really quickly, as far as these go, fully sprinkled, fire protection, Assistant Chief Kresick. I know they have to meet fire codes, but do we mandate that a building this size is sprinkled?
Mike Kresick, Fire Department. We would evaluate the building spec plans to determine the need for fire suppression in them. Generally find that these structures aren't. They are relatively smaller in scale, but certainly we'll monitor that as the building plans come forward. The units are subject to all prevailing fire prevention codes.
So then, am I correct in saying every time a building's rented out, they'll come in here and let us know what the particular use is, if they're storing collector cars or they're storing product for their business?
When they are purchased, because they're not rented.
They are purchased, okay.
These are purchased. They have to get occupancy permit for what type of use they're going to have. So by contractor's yard, we're looking, we'll know if, I don't know, Edelman carpet cleaning comes in they have to get an occupancy, and then the city will be known, but it won't come before Plan Commission.
Okay, so we would know if, just to say a carpet cleaner came in and he was storing carpet cleaning chemicals in the facility. Would we know that? Or would the fire department know that?
We would know at the point of the occupancy permit being submitted. And I think it's important to note that these buildings are constructed to a certain specification. The construction methods, the construction materials, and the size of the structure also help dictate what type of occupancy could take place in those particular structures without fire suppression being provided. For instance, having a vehicle maintenance shop would generally not be permitted without a suppression system in place.
Okay.
Any other questions? Commissioner Carrillo?
Is there any signage that goes along with these?
I believe the only signage that the applicant is here could probably answer that, but I believe they only have a monument sign saying Self-Storage USA. And the idea of this use is not to bring customers to this location. These are people who will, they have their vehicle there, they have their equipment there, they usually take it out and go to the site to work. You're not going to be bringing people to this location.
Right, I just wanted to make sure that you wouldn't, Edelman's comes in and then they just don't put a big billboard on there or some kind of signage. Okay.
You'd be allowed one monument sign, so, potentially, maybe they could have a directory sign, similar to like we saw for the Potbellies. They had, 5 or 6 panels. That would be the most that you would have for this site.
Anyone else? Motion?
Which will make a motion that the Plan Commission recommend to the Common Council approve the rezoning and conditional use permit for a contractor's office, shops, and yard with no outdoor storage for the properties at 331 and 401 East Oak Street after a public hearing and subject to conditions and restrictions that will be prepared for the commission's review at the next meeting.
And
Go
I
ahead.
heard Corral seconds. Roll call.
Johnston, aye.
Carrillo, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Scafidi, aye.
Kuzikowski, aye. Corral, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Item 4C is a plan review of site plan submitted by the Sikh Temple of Wisconsin for additions to the existing parking areas on the property at 7512 South Howell Avenue, tax key number 781-9031. Carrie.
Thank you. The request is for site plan review for a parking lot extension and as it relates to some expansion of recreational facilities on the south side. Those are passive. One may be a soccer field potentially and a small playground. This is at the property highlighted in red on your screen. The expansion of the parking lot is proposed for the southeast corner, which is along Howell Avenue. If I bring up the landscape plan, shows you what the screening would be as proposed for this parking lot expansion. Right now, there are 154 parking stalls. The proposal here is for 244 at a max. Parking must be located at least 15 feet from rights-of-way and property lines. This plan does appear to meet those requirements, although there is a question as to whether that southeast corner is at 15 feet. There was a label on the plan that made it difficult to verify that it was 15 feet back. This landscaping shows that there's screening from the right-of-way along Howell Avenue on the west and also for the properties to the north and south. There is a fence proposed for a portion of the southern parking area in addition to landscaping. The soccer field, because there is no finalization of the location or time frame for installing that soccer field at this point, could move slightly. You'll notice that the landscape plan and the site plan don't show it in the exact same location, but should there be a soccer field that goes in there, it is for the use of the temple patrons, and they can, the applicant can speak a little bit more about that later. It was recommended to them that they consider putting additional vegetation along there to screen that from the residential properties to the south. There are a few revisions that are required for the civil and landscape plans to match. Those revision requests have been made to the applicant and their consultants. Parking lot lighting details are also required, and they need to be submitted for review and approval by the electrical inspector. They are not shown in these plans.
I did receive today an email from a resident asking about the lighting, and that's the answer.
Correct. There have been no lighting plans submitted to date. The soccer field, I've been informed, would not be lit. I am unclear as to whether or not there would be additional parking lot lighting. I assume there would be, but this, again, we would be required to, they would be required to provide those details. I did receive 2 emails from residents that were provided to the Plan Commission expressing their concerns about lighting and for screening to the residences to the south. Also a question about noise and when construction would occur. Now, I also want to make it known that we did meet with the applicants this week to discuss the plans. This is considered a maximum build-out. Should they have any changes to the plans, staff would be working with them to ensure that all requirements are adhered to in terms of compliance with the local code. Staff's recommendation is that the Plan Commission approves the site plan submitted by the Sikh Temple for the property at 7512 South Howell Avenue with conditions 1 through 5. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Open it up to the commission for questions or comments. Alderman Bekavich?
Carrie, just concerning the number of parking spaces, I know the soccer field's proposed. Is there any proportional number you have to have for a field that size?
No, this is a private soccer field. It's a recreation field for the temple. So there's no, it's not going to be a commercial recreation facility. It's not a park. So, you know, it's not required to have a certain number of parking stalls.
Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Chandler?
So we received an email message about one of the residents' concerns. Can you share on the screen where this concern is exactly?
The residences are to the south, so this doesn't show all of Manitoba Avenue, but I can show you on the location map. It's the residences along this street here. So south of where the proposed parking and soccer field would be.
So were there any discussions with the residents about this issue?
I received the emails today and forwarded them on. I was not able to contact any of them following my receipt of the emails.
So just for the applicant, can you review what the concern is?
Well, the applicants were also forwarded the emails.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Commissioner Correll?
As long as we're on that topic, when looking at where their concerns are, where the houses are, it looks like we've got some fencing proposed.
That's correct.
And I guess my question would be, is the fencing, does staff feel it's adequate based on some of those potential concerns?
The fencing is in conjunction with the landscaping that's blocking the parking lots or the parking stalls themselves. They're not intended to block the activities on the recreation field. That's why staff made the recommendation prior to receiving the email concerns from the residents that the Sikh Temple applicants consider adding some vegetation on the rest of that southern side to kind of block some of the soccer field activities from those residences.
In addition to what's there, but I guess in looking at it and based on some neighbor comments that what's there for screening now or in the past is really not a lot there. Inadequate. Yeah, I guess I would say. So my concern would be, I don't have a problem with the lot, but I think having the forester or someone involved, that there's enough screening there and that we make sure it ends up there.
Right. What's proposed along the south is a 6-foot tall fence, wood fence, to the corner there. And it was extended just a little bit. You can see in the southeast corner where there's a tree and a few shrubs and a couple of, I think they're junipers here. The fence line is proposed to end right about here. That was intended to provide the most screening of the parking lot for, to prevent lights from going through to those, to the southern residences. And then adding the landscaping here to kind of further block some of the lights that would be coming from the vehicles that would be traveling down to this southern parking area. As far as the soccer field is concerned, we don't really regulate the soccer field, so we can make suggestions at this point. As long as it's not lit, that's about all we can do at this point.
And I guess my concerns are that what sound like the neighbors aren't as much the soccer field as that
Right.
our recommendation to the vegetation, I think, has to be more than a recommendation.
Well,
me to
and
support.
I just want to clarify that what's shown on the plan is what's required. Okay?
Got it.
If the plan commission were to add some additional buffering requirements, because you do have that authority for the, buffering between the residential portion and the expanded parking lot, you can certainly do so, but this meets the minimum requirement.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Commissioner Sieber.
I have a question about lighting. There's been a complaint on one of these letters about the way the lighting is. If we had our electrical inspectors look at that and how that's set up, and the additional lighting that is also going to come with that parking.
You do need to have the lighting approved by the electrical inspector. He does need to receive those plans before he can issue any kind of review or approval. And the applicants are aware of that requirement. We don't have anything at this time.
When I talked to Jim Perino, he's been out there many times for lighting questions or additions that they've done to the site, so he's aware of it. Anyone else? Alderman Guzikowski?
Is there any consideration, in this one letter, they mentioned the berm, any consideration that they would have a berm along that south border that would help with, alleviate the majority of the headlights coming through?
Well, I would leave it to the commission to determine whether or not a berm is preferable over a fence. You would have vegetative screening on top of that berm,
Right.
but it's a matter of, is there enough room for a berm? Where would they put how would that affect the stormwater plans that they have? So,
Just my 2 cents, but this seems to be an adequate screening given what's there now. And I think the residents are far enough away. Some of the residents have their own fences, actually, so I think this is a nice upgrade. It gives them the opportunity to fully utilize their property and do some more things with their members, which is good. So I don't have a problem. I think the proposal as submitted is fine.
and I just want to stress that, again, this is a maximum build out. When I spoke with the applicants this week, there is some indication that perhaps this could be a phased plan, or that some of these parking stalls may either be relocated or not installed at this time. But again, this is considered a maximum build out.
Yep.
To that point, that's great that it would be phased, but the fence and the vegetation line shouldn't be phased.
That's correct.
Okay.
It would be required as
Okay.
part of the screening.
Anyone else? Alderman Bekavich?
Speaking of stormwater, will any of the homes to the south be impacted by putting this parking lot in, or is the pond adequate, or will regrading have to take part to protect those homes to the south?
Well, I did speak with our environmental engineer, Phil Biermeister, about the stormwater. Now, again, this plan is calling for the installation of a brand-new stormwater pond to supplement the one that's already there. Depending upon what gets built, whether or not this whole phase gets built, whether or not some of the parking stalls are reduced, what have you, if there's a change to the stormwater, it will have to be held on that land, and it would have to be approved by him. As far as the grading is concerned, I would defer to Commissioner Johnston if he has any input into that.
Help me, Brian?
Mr. Johnson?
What they have proposed in their grading plan, it shows a swale along that south property line with catch basins to pick up that drainage. There currently is sheet flowing off their site, so it should improve what's out there. We still need to go through the stormwater plan, get that approved, and have that reviewed.
Will the pond go in with the parking lot, or will it wait for the soccer field?
It's going to depend on what gets built and how much gets built on what triggers the needs for that pond. If it all gets built, then they'll go in first.
You just do the parking lot, the pond will wait?
it depends on how much of the impervious surface that they add. If they just add a minor amount, they might not need the full pond to be built now because what is out there catches that. That'll all need to be worked out with what they plan.
Anyone else?
Is there a
Commissioner Seifert?
time limit on building this additional parking? Or are they going to phase it in?
I don't think that we have a phasing plan at this point. It was just something that was discussed during a meeting this week with the applicants. I don't have a time frame in mind for when they were planning on starting or when they were planning on completing it. I have not recommended a time frame for completion either.
Thank you.
No one else? Motion on 4C.
David will make the motion that the Plan Commission approve the site plans submitted by the Sikh Temple for the property at 7512 South Howell with the following conditions. 1, that all fire codes are met. 2, that the civil and landscape plans are revised to match each other and incorporate corrections as noted by staff. 3, that all final plans, site, landscape, etc. are submitted in digital and paper formats for review and approval by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of permit applications. 4, that the final lighting plans are submitted for final approval by the electrical inspector prior to the submission of building permit applications. And 5, that the stormwater and grading plans are submitted for final approval by the engineering department prior to the issuance of permits.
Guzekowski will second.
Roll call.
Dunstan, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Speedy, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Crowell, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Moving on to 4D, it's a certified survey map review submitted by Arlene Budke, We Energies, for the property at 10861 South Howell Avenue, tax key number 955-1014. Applicant is here. Welcome. Carrie?
Thank you. This is a CSM request to divide the lot in the current Lot 4 into 2 development lots and 1 outlot that will be used for stormwater infrastructure. And that is for Oakview Business Park. On your screen right now, and I will make it a little bit bigger so that people can actually see what we're talking about here, is the plan for the division of the lot. Lot 1, after division, will be about 15.8 acres in size. Lot 2, about 6.5, and Outlot 1 for the stormwater infrastructure, about 9.7 acres. All of these are of conforming size. Easements and wetlands are shown on the property, on the map. There are some comments that were received from the Wisconsin Department of Transportation that were forwarded on to the applicant for their inclusion into a revised CSM. Staff's recommendation is that the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council that the certified survey map submitted by Arlene Budke of We Energies and West Park LLC for the property at 10861 South Howell Avenue be approved subject to condition 1. Mr. Mayor.
All right, questions or comments on 4D? Seeing none, motion.
Crowell moves that the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council that the certified survey map submitted by Arlene Budke, We Energies, and West Park LLC for the property at 10861 South Howell Avenue be approved with the following condition: that all technical corrections, including but not limited to spelling errors, minor coordinate geometry corrections, and corrections required for compliance with the municipal code and Wisconsin statutes are made prior to recording.
Seifert, second.
Roll call.
Dunstan, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Speedy, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Crowell, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
And following up, that one is another one for We Energies. 4E is a plan review of site plan submitted by Arlene Budke, We Energies, for an electric substation building and related structures on a portion of the property at 10861 South Howell Avenue, tax key number 955-1014.
The request for the electrical substation is on that Lot 2 that was just approved by the CSM, in the CSM that was just reviewed. This is an overall site plan. This is showing the Lot 1 with access off of Howell here. This would be the site itself. Zooming in a little bit, you get a better picture of what the electrical substation extent would be, per code, electrical substations must be located a minimum of 50 feet from all property lines. With this proposal, that setback requirement is met. This was granted a conditional use permit by the Common Council on February 7th. Parking is not required, as this is not going to be staffed 24/7. The only time that it would be occupied would be during maintenance periods. There is security fencing around the site. That's 7.5-foot cut-resistant mesh fence with 12 inches of barbed wire, so for a total of 8.5 feet tall. There is a gate also with signage. There's an optional gate that would be put closer to Howell Avenue. Landscaping is on your screen. There's a total of 11 trees that are proposed outside of the fence. The fence itself, again, is cut-resistant mesh that provides some screening. There is a concern for security, so keeping it a little bit open and viewable from the road is what's preferable by We Energies. Lighting is manually controlled. There are motion sensor lights that would be on the building, which is on the southern side here. If needed, there is one approval in the conditional use permit for a maximum 50-foot tall wooden communications pole. That's a private communications pole to be used only by We Energies if needed. And they have told me that their maximum height would actually be probably about 45 feet if they need that. The building itself is a metal building. These are just the elevations. They don't really provide much in the way of giving you an idea of what it looks like. So we'll go to the example photograph here. This is what the one building on the property might look like. Because it is a metal panel building, it would require a 3/4 majority approval of the Plan Commission, since it doesn't actually meet our minimum building standards for exterior building materials.
Is it the standard for these types of uses?
Yes, it is.
Thanks.
Yes. And if there are any questions about what the remaining structures on the property or what the site might look like, these are other examples. This is an example of what the gate and fence would look like surrounding the perimeter of the site itself. A couple of warning signs and an identification sign, as well as the optional gate that would be closer to Howell Avenue with a couple of notice signs and, again, an identification sign. Staff's recommendation is that the Plan Commission approves the site and building plans submitted by Arlene Buckey of We Energies for a portion of the property at 10861 South Howell Avenue, subject to conditions 1 through 5. Mr. Mayor.
Any questions or comments from the commission? Seeing none, motion on 4E.
Gavich will move that the Plan Commission approve the site and building plans submitted by Arlene Budke, We Energies, for a portion of the property at 10861 South Howell Avenue with the following conditions. 1, that all building and fire codes are met. 2, that the detailed plans and a permit application, if required for signage, are submitted to the inspection department. 3, that all final plans, site, building, etc., are submitted in digital and paper formats for review and approval by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of building permit applications. 4, that the final lighting plans are submitted for final approval by the electrical inspector prior to the submission of building permit applications. And 5, that stormwater and grading plans are submitted for final approval by the engineering department prior to the issuance of permits.
Guzekowski, second.
Roll call.
Johnston, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Gavich, aye.
PDI.
Guzekowski, aye.
Crowell, aye.
Skipper, aye.
Chandler, aye.
All right, 4F is a conditions and restrictions review for a conditional use permit request submitted by Mike Youngerman, Opus Development Company LLC, for a freight terminal, 2 20,000-gallon underground fuel tanks, and outdoor dolly storage on the property at 500 West Opus Drive, tax key number 924-9012. Carrie.
Thank you. This is the property that is highlighted in red on your screen right now. Plan commissioners may recall that this was not actually recommended for approval by the commission to the council. However, the applicants chose to continue the process with the council, and the council did approve the use at a hearing on January 17th. And they directed the Plan Commission to review the proposed conditions and restrictions that are before you for your review tonight. We have quite a few conditions and restrictions. This is a newer use in the city as far as extent of the proposal. And what I'd like to draw your attention to are just a few things in the conditions and restrictions themselves, starting with page 1. We do have a request in here for under section 2, subsection 6D, for under fire protection containment plan for the fuel tanks. There were quite a few emails that were submitted this afternoon that were provided to the Plan Commission and to the applicants regarding neighbor concerns for the installation and safety of those tanks. Under
Just, sorry to interrupt. Mike, can you come to the table just in case we need you? Thanks. Sorry, Carrie.
Under subsection B on that same page, just kind of giving you, giving a little bit more clarification as to what would be required for Plan Commission review going forward should this be approved. Plans for new buildings, additions, structures, exterior remodeling, or site layout modifications would require further Plan Commission review. Turning to page 2, under subsection D, the highlighted section is an add-on. The Oak Creek Water and Sewer Utility would also have to approve the sanitary sewer water main connections. They have provided comments, and those have been forwarded to the applicants. Any public improvements required to serve the property would be the sole cost of the property owner. Under subsection G on that same page, traffic signals at the intersection of Howell Avenue and Oakwood Road shall be upgraded and installed per the traffic impact analysis and approved development agreement. Costs for such upgrades and installation shall be the responsibility of the applicant and/or property owners. Under subsection 3A, parking for this development shall be cited and provided in accordance with section 170403 of the municipal code. That's the standard. Additionally, one designated space within an approved structure or surface lot for each trailer, tractor, truck, maintenance vehicle, and dolly shall be provided as approved by the Plan Commission. Parking of vehicles, trailers, and equipment shall be confined to areas specifically designated on the approved site plan. That's the approved site plan that will be before the Plan Commission should this move forward. Under subsection D, parking areas and driveways adjacent to a residential zoning district line shall, at a minimum, provide buffer yards as required by section 17.0205 of the municipal code. As a reminder, the buffer code requirement does say that it is a 20-foot minimum buffer in addition to any setbacks. Subsection 3G on this page, all off-street parking areas shall be landscaped in accordance with the code as stated in those sections. Subsection H, adjustments to the required parking may be made by the Plan Commission in accordance with code. Subsection I, loading areas shall be provided in accordance with code. At no time shall any part of a truck or van be allowed to extend into the right-of-way of a public thoroughfare while being loaded or unloaded. Page 3, subsection J, any off-site improvements shall be the responsibility of the property owners. That's with regard to driveway approaches. Under subsection K, a second point of access to West Oakwood Road shall be provided to the site for the use of emergency vehicles only. That is on the southwestern side of the property. So it's on this L shape that's on the southwest corner. Unfortunately, you can't see my cursor here, but it's along Oakwood Road.
Only to be utilized by emergency vehicle.
That is correct. Subsection L, trucks utilizing this facility shall adhere to all posted traffic signs and regulations. Trucks entering and exiting this site shall not utilize West Oakwood Road west of its intersection with South Opus Drive. Under section 4B, for lighting, pole height, the height of parking lot light poles shall not exceed 25 feet as measured from grade. Light shielding, light sources shall be shielded or installed so that there is not a direct line of sight between the light source or its reflection and a 0.5 feet or higher above the ground of adjacent properties and streets. That's taken directly from code. The intention is to prevent light trespass and provide some screening for the residences along Oakwood. Light fixtures shall not be permitted within required buffer yards, and exterior lights shall conform to the requirements specified in a subsection below with regard to reduction and extinguishment after hours. Turning to page 4. Under subsection E, screening of loading docks shall be screened from adjacent properties through the use of landscaping, berming, fencing, or other means approved by the Plan Commission. That would be during site plan review, although requirements for berming could be incorporated into these conditions and restrictions as the Plan Commission sees fit. Turning to page 5 of 9, under subsection N, landscaping shall be installed and maintained in accordance with the approved landscape plan and executed development agreement. That would be per the approved plan by the Plan Commission at a later date, and the development agreement that would be drawn up for the property for the development itself. Turning to page 6, under subsection K, this is stating that the Plan Commission can modify some of the standards that are in the previous section by a 3/4 majority vote of the commissioners present at a meeting, only if supplemental design standards or improvements are incorporated into the project which compensate for the modifications. That's standard from our code. Under section 7, building parking setbacks, these are establishing the setbacks and identifying some of those areas that are required, that are specifically called out in code. So the front and street setback for structures is 40 feet, 30 feet for off-street parking. Rear setback and side setback for principal and accessory structures would be 20 feet, and off-street parking would have to be 15 feet from the side and rear. And again, there is a note here that these setbacks are the minimum, and buffer yard requirements are in addition to these setbacks. Under section 8, sub D, hours of operation, operations may occur 24 hours per day, 7 days per week. However, between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., outdoor activities shall be restricted to those deemed essential for continued operations. Turning to page
Who
7.
determines what's essential for operations?
Essential for operations would be limiting it to the extent possible the exterior movement, because the dollies, as my understanding, are the ones that have the backup alarms. So transporting items exterior, we're trying to get to where we're not limiting the operation itself so much that they cannot operate, but that they are giving some relief to the residential neighbors.
Thank you.
Page 7 of 9, subsection E, exterior lights shall be extinguished or reduced to a maximum of 50% in areas not actively in use and reduced to levels deemed essential for safety in areas in active use. Again, trying to limit some of those activities in consideration of the residential neighbors. F, no outdoor paging systems shall be used. That is on site at all times. G, the use and volume of backup alarms shall be limited to the minimum required by federal law, again at all times. Subsection H, idling of equipment or vehicles shall be limited to a maximum of 5 minutes in any 1 hour period. Exceptions are limited to the following. 1, idling necessary for diagnostic or inspection purposes. Unless an emergency exists, idling for diagnostic or inspection purposes shall only occur between the hours of 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. 2, idling to operate defrosters, heaters, or air conditioners to prevent a safety or health emergency. 3, vehicles may idle up to 15 minutes in a 1 hour period if the outside air temperature is 32 degrees Fahrenheit or below, or 80 degrees Fahrenheit and above. Section I, security fences and associated gates. 1, shall be subject to Plan Commission approval for location, material, and opacity. 2, shall not exceed 10 feet in height. 3, shall not incorporate barbed wire. 4, shall be maintained in a structurally sound, safe, and attractive condition. Subsection J, outdoor storage shall be limited to dolly equipment in designated parking areas as approved by the Plan Commission. Section 9, under signs, no pole signs shall be permitted as part of this development. And C, traffic directional signs shall be located solely for the purpose of relieving traffic congestion and promoting the safe flow of traffic within the development. Also, giving a maximum height above established grade and maximum square footage as deemed by code, which would be 5 feet above grade and 6 square feet in total. Under 10 permitted uses, 1 freight terminal with 2 underground fuel storage tanks in excess of 5,000 gallons, and outdoor storage of dolly equipment subject to plan approval by the Plan Commission. Finally, under time of compliance, the operator of the conditional use shall commence operations in accordance with these conditions and restrictions for the conditional use within 12 months from the date of adoption of the ordinance, and shall expire within 12 months after the date of the adoption of the ordinance if a building permit has not been issued for this use. That is a standard code requirement. We did receive quite a few emails that were passed along to the Plan Commissioners. this afternoon.
I can summarize them if you want. We can do it before all the resident, I got 2 on my desk. Are there more than that?
No, the 2 that were provided were provided to the commission were also provided to the applicants.
Right.
Opposed to the idea of 2 20,000 fuel gallon tanks in the ground. This is coming from one of the owners of the building that is north of the property at 10,001 South Howell Avenue. We have future plans of developing the land behind our building, and our concern would be the potential environmental hazards. Another person is opposed to the development itself. And we did have I did have a neighbor phone call, and rather than summarizing that, that conversation, if they are here, I would just defer to them to provide their comments.
Who are you referring to?
Mr. Hiram Buffington?
Is he here? Oh, okay. Did you fill out one of these or no? We'll hear from him when I call the residents. Yeah, he's on my group here.
And I also received some comments from Alderman Gale regarding some potential
Who's in the
conditions-
audience?
Regarding some potential additional requirements, as well as some wording changes.
Okay, and he can speak for himself when we open it up for comments.
Staff's recommendation is that the Plan Commission recommends that the Common Council adopt the conditions and restrictions as part of the conditional use permit for a freight terminal with 2 underground fuel storage tanks in excess of 5,000 gallons and outdoor storage of dolly equipment as accessory uses at 500 West Opus Drive, subject to any conditions that may be changed during this discussion. Mr. Mayor.
Thanks for summarizing all those changes. I did get one more, and I assume you got it as well. This person, the last name is Blaauw? Blau?
Yes, that's the person that I said is just opposed to it.
Yeah, he's just opposed to it, and he objected to the meeting date. So, for whatever that's worth. All right, got, looks like about 8 of these, so we'll call you up, and you get 3 minutes. Tell us your thoughts, specifically as it relates to this agenda item, what we talked about tonight, what Carrie just talked about as far as the specific conditions, and we'll move through. All right, first up is Elise Wetzel. Welcome. Name and address, everybody that comes up for the record.
Elise Wetzel, 574 West Oakwood Road. I have a bunch of questions, but obviously I only have 3 minutes.
Any questions you have that we can't get to, you submit them, we'll get you answers.
Okay, I just want to know, she stated that there was going to be all kinds of restrictions as to idling, the unloading of trucks between 10 and 6 a.m. I would like to know who's going to be in charge of that. As I understand, she said between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. in the morning that it would be limited but not stopping completely, which I feel is a little unfair to all of us that live there listening to trucks beeping. And we already hear everything from renewables that's over there, GE. Mm-hmm. You hear every truck that turns around, every truck that backs in, UPS, FedEx, every truck that backs in, you hear hit that dock. Okay. And 574 is obviously right in line with where this is going to go. And I would really like to know who's regulating that. I was concerned about the tank safety and, if something did happen, what would happen to all of us, with the water.
That location of the tanks or the size of the tanks?
The location of the tanks, because if something did happen, it's underground.
As soon as you're done, I'll have Mr. Kresick speak.
Okay. And then, where'd it go? And I'm not completely against, obviously you have Town Square, which is beautiful. I'm not completely against Oak Creek expanding. I've lived here my entire life. But I don't think that this is the right area for this. I feel like it's a good idea, but it's a bad location. It's a really quiet neighborhood, and now you want to add 300 some odd trucks plus their employees whipping back and forth. Those are my main concerns.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming up. Enforcement of those items she raised, anyone want to comment? Pete or Carrie, quickly?
Likely it'll be my position as zoning administrator to enforce the conditional use permit, but I'd be working in partnership with the police department since my hours of operation are 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. So police department would be a partner in enforcing this part of the conditional use permit.
Okay. Mr. Kresick, comment on the appropriateness of the tanks, the size, concerns?
Certainly the size of the tanks is going to be determined by the facility and their particular needs. Last Plan Commission, we did have the discussion concerning above-ground tanks, the hazards that you generally see with above-ground installations versus the hazards with underground installations. Now we do have that underground installation. It presents certain challenges in the future. If there is any type of leakage, it is going to go into the soil and potentially contaminate a area. There's always that risk. Certainly the technology has gotten better, and that the state of Wisconsin and the fire department would be participating in the planning and inspection of the installation of those facilities. In short, there is always a risk. Yes, any installation like this would pose that.
Okay, thank you. Sure, go ahead. Commissioner Corral.
We were provided some information. I'm not a underground tank expert. Stay at a Holiday Inn Express, no idea. But the information shared seemed to state that there was a considerable high number of potential leak issues. Any comment as to the validity of that statement?
I won't substantiate or deny in either direction. Usually with the underground installations, the fire department finds out late. We find out when there is a new development going in. We find out when there's a demolition or when there's some sort of DNR action that notices leaks in the area. Very rarely is the fire department or most city departments made aware of an immediate leak in these type of facilities. It's unfortunate, but we generally find out later in the process when the contamination has taken place. Now, as far as the incidence of those, I could not comment on nationwide statistics. The only comment I'll revert back to is certainly the technology and installation methods have changed over the years to try to prevent those from occurring. And certainly those are improvements in the tank industry.
Thank you.
Okay. Next. Quickly,
I just-
Commissioner
A
Seibert.
quick question. Does the city have any means of checking any underground leaks, or is that the DNR for potential leaks that could take place?
Except for what Assistant Chief Kresick just said, I am not aware of any means that we have.
If they needed tanks, could they have the tanks above ground? It's not pretty, but at least if there's a leak, you're not contaminating the soil.
The applicant here? Okay. All right, let's go back to the audience because there's a bunch of people that were waiting to speak. So next up is Tom Mueller. Name and address for the record.
Tom Miller, 320 West Oakwood Road. I have questions about the exit point from this bermed property onto Opus Drive. If I'm coming out their driveway, if you will, the trucks are turning this way and then coming back out to go to Oakwood. I'm worried about the lights flashing the woods all night long, even though that's supposed to be restricted traffic. But the hours of greater use also are before dawn. And I already see a street light through my woods, and I don't look forward to every few minutes getting truck lights here. Similarly, on Oakwood Road, people coming west on Oakwood and turning by the cemetery to go in there are flashing the cemetery all night long, too. Those people in the cemetery include two new graves right at that corner. Right at that corner also is the visionary owner of the entire woods on the 1876 plat map. He's buried on land that he basically gave for the cemetery. And so I'm wondering, could there be wooden fencing that kind of would block those lights in that arc of a turning vehicle in back of me and by the cemetery?
Okay.
That's my major specific concern.
Okay. I'm actually the caretaker of that cemetery, Oakwood Rest, so spent a lot of time out there. We did have two burials recently in last month, right next to each other, actually.
The wooden fencing that comes to my mind, at least, I'm not a specialist, is kind of like what I have, part of it in my backyard. But if you went north on Howell Avenue there around the subdivision after the horse farm. There's a whole row of different kinds of wooden fencing.
So where are you envisioning, or where are you proposing this fence line?
I'm proposing some feet of fence. Now, in my backyard, we just redid the posts because they were rotting and they were 6-foot sections. So, you know, I'm just pulling a number 30 feet worth by the cemetery. That would
So-
take care of the turning vehicles.
Be on the south side of Opus Drive.
South side of Opus, preventing headlights from going through the woods and into
Right.
your property.
Right.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Al Leisher. Address for the record?
Good evening. My name is Al Leisher from 574 West Oakwood Road. I have a few questions that I would hopefully get answers to. First one is, I would like to know why FedEx doesn't expand their present facility in Franklin. There's plenty of land available out there, way better access to the freeway, and very few neighbors to upset. My next thing is, are they going to change that road that my property abounds? Because I need access to the back of my lot now. I don't want them taking out that road.
Which road are you referring to?
Pardon?
Which road are you referring to?
The one that's 500,
Opus
you
Drive?
know, the one on the back side of the lots.
Okay.
Yeah, I really need access to that. I'm hoping they're not going to change that.
I don't think they're going to take the road out. I think they're going to improve the road, actually.
Okay. I also have concerns about the watershed of this area. Before Opus put that road in, most of that rainwater ran off into that small wetland area. When they put in that road, they cut off the natural drainage to that wetland, and it all got diverted to my property and my neighbor's property. So now all that rainwater that comes down flows through the back of my property. This is also going to be a problem further up towards the road because the lots are fairly low, and all that water that comes through people's backyards near the road essentially flows out towards that pond that they're going to put in. Now, I'm hoping that when they do the site grading, they're going to take this into consideration so that it doesn't turn into one big pond. The other thing is, someone mentioned at the previous meeting about the thick vegetation that is behind these houses. It's not that thick.
The woods.
Right.
It's a relatively young woods.
And if you do a quick search on noise abatement, it doesn't do a thing for quieting up the noise. That really doesn't work. If you have any doubts, you can come sit in my backyard. You will hear every semi from that turn that the other gentleman is talking about. You can hear them come down that road, do the turnaround, and either stop and park, have lunch, breakfast, whatever, and take off again. It is quite noisy.
Okay.
And then to get this 300 times a day, go figure. And as to the idling of the trucks and things, who's going to enforce this?
I think we just heard that that's the job of our code enforcement gentleman sitting there and the police department.
So I'm going to call them and say, hey, this truck's been running
You
7
would call
minutes.
us and make a complaint, formal complaint on whatever you're witnessing, make that.
They can't even enforce the speed limit on Oakwood Road.
We do a good job with speed limit. So am I hearing a general complaint about speeds on Oakwood?
Oh, hell yeah.
All right, off the agenda, I've heard that.
It's
All right.
horrible.
I've got your questions. The first one is whether FedEx wants to build in Franklin or Oak Creek. They've made a decision to come to Oak Creek, so that's what we're considering. I'm not going to
I understand
I'm not
that.
going to second guess them. The road, from my understanding, will be improved, and that's a good thing. That road's necessary. The site grading, I'll leave it up to Brian Johnson to talk about that. I would assume that the plan is going to move the water more efficiently and protect those back ends of the lots as much as it could.
There's not really going to be a change on the south side of the road. The drainage on the site will be detained. That'll go to stormwater ponds that'll be constructed for the site, but nothing south of the road. There's not enough right of way for
And
anything.
what about when they put that pond in? Some of those ponds, like the one by the old Staples building, it has a high berm around it to where this water flowing through my backyard isn't going to get in there. That's what I'm concerned about.
They'll have catch basins and swales to accommodate that water flow. And
Or
we
some
still,
kind of ditch or something, just so that water can keep moving?
yes.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And correct me if I'm wrong, isn't the water department going to actually improve by hooking up the sanitary sewers and everything in this lot that's always been planned for it? That's going to be completed within this loop because of this development? Oh, I'm sorry. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought somewhere in our conversations, the water utility is actually going to improve the site because of the sanitary sewer and finishing out that whole project.
The sanitary
Completing the
sewer
loop.
is already installed for the site. The water will be looped through the site to have a looped water system through here. And then the storm sewer will actually be completed with this project.
So again, we're actually improving the site by developing the site.
Okay. I think it's H.J. Buffington.
My name is Hiram Buffington. I'm a resident of Fairfield Subdivision, 9651 South Fox Run. And my kudos to the young lady here that prepared the summary of the request back to the developer. But I see some weaknesses in the information that has been conveyed to us. It seems to me that what you're bringing in, and in our subdivision, it's over 20 million in tax base. We've been there 25 years. We've been paying 25 years, and we feel that we've been sold out. We think the Plan Commission had it correct when they disapproved this, and we think it was irresponsible for the Common Council to override that. Now, as far as issues, there's a lot of environmental impairment that's going to occur because of this project. And I'll start with the air emissions of these so-called mobile sources. But when you collectively add 100-plus idling diesel engines spewing hazardous air contaminants into the air, collecting on the paved surfaces and running off into your stormwater collection system, you're not doing anybody any favors. The second thing is, it doesn't even mention the noise control in there. It's my understanding that the city ordinance that deal with that exempts mobile sources. Does that mean that it exempts all of these hundreds? And why is not a provision added to these requirements, these restrictions, that says that they have to meet the same noise level at their boundary as everyone else? So they're using the federal approach to regulating these sources to skirt the noise issue. Now, the EPA, in their wisdom, says that we will deal with these environmental hazards by the Tier 3 vehicle and fuel standards. But, you know, those things will not be finalized until after 2030, and it'll only affect a certain portion of these sources. So that's an issue. The property noise issue is certainly an oversight. You have to do something about that. And from what I've seen, the amount of vegetation and berming is not going to do that for you. Now, we're not the only subdivisions. As I said, there's 101 residents in ours, but I see several others that are going to be impacted just as well. So I think this whole process has been corrupted, and I don't know if it's for political reasons or why. And then I would say that there has to be a payback for doing all this. And I don't know what it's going to generate in the way of funds, but it's hard for me to say that this is going to be a bigger economic advantage to this community than the residents that are there now and paying good money in their property taxes. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for your comments. Predrag Duranja? Dunja. That was close. Welcome.
I'm Predrag Duranja. I live next to this gentleman, Buffy.
You know the address? Just for the record?
9654 South Fox.
Thanks. Thanks. Appreciate it.
I voluntarily declare witness of Mr. Buffington. I want to add something. Just I lived a long time ago on a road next to the road that was kind of major artery entrance into the city. And I know very good what noise people that live next to it go through. So I don't know what's frequency of traffic, what will be increase of frequency of traffic around our neighborhood, but I tell you, it's not pleasant. You have feeling that you are in a parking lot of trucks. If you want to know how it sounds and it looks, everybody can go Ryan Road and take a look. So I understand we want business. It's good for us, but then at the other hand, we don't want to step on our toes either.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Arden Degner.
Arden Degner, 8540 South Pennsylvania Avenue. This omits the requirements that I understand all service stations must adhere to in the urban area, in that the tanks have to be removed from the ground to prevent contamination. If this and when this facility moves, sells out, or leaves the area, there's no reason why a requirement for removal of these kind of polluting devices, potential polluting devices from the ground should not be added. This is an omission because filling stations require that now for their tanks. They have a limited time out of service. Then they must be removed. To restore this ground environmentally, we have to consider the environment in ground as well as the environment in which we live in, because we have to keep our ground productive. We just can't contaminate it and then go into a brownfield problem like we're having in other parts of the city. So we've got to have this added to our code. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Degner. Final one, Alderman Gale, you filled one out. You want to add your comments? And then I'll open it up to the commission for comments and questions.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll just be brief. Doug and Kerry, I communicated some stuff with you, and we can obviously discuss that as we move forward, especially on the frontage road. Gentleman here obviously made a comment that he feels it should stay there, so we'll have to discuss that, the merits of potentially removing it, as the developer had suggested at some point in the discussions as we move forward. I think others in the audience have covered the health and the environmental and the noise complaints. I'm coming at this basically from a strategic kind of standpoint. I oppose this at the common council vote. From that standpoint, I think that's kind of, and Mr. Buffington kind of alluded to the fact that, it's my opinion, wrong product for the wrong property. Franklin, where this facility is actually relocating from, is actually excluding this usage from its new business park that they're going to form on that property in Franklin. So given its low value, these things typically don't hold their value over time. That is an issue that we need to concern ourselves with. In fact, especially as it's going to, in the meantime, will help pay to close the TIF. But once the TIF closes, if it does not hold the value that we expect it to hold, calculations at $8 million of value, this thing only contributes $21,000 to the city's tax increment. So we've got a lot of potential maintenance and upkeep on the intersections and on the roads. that we have to, make sure we're taking into account. If we're not escrowing for them right up front, that is going to be a significant issue. So I think that's a significant concern, the fact that this thing and this particular usage on this particular property really does not, from an economic standpoint, drive enough value that actually going to be able to make sure that we can maintain and support our road systems with the heavy usage we're going to see out of these particular trucks and traffic.
Thank you, sir. I'll open up to the commission for questions, comments. Alderman Bekavich.
I guess I'll start, and I'm going to direct this one to you to begin with, Mike, and maybe you can say this. I know the state actually has regulated tank inspections, whether it's a gasoline station or a facility like this. Do you know how often they have to be inspected? And also, I believe they have to be upgraded, removed a certain number of years. Can you comment on that? Do you know any of that?
I do have a general idea on what the inspection period is. I hate to comment on it because it is somewhat of an estimate on my part. The state is active as they can be currently in evaluating these facilities, both above ground and underground tanks. So I believe it suffices to say that it will be inspected.
Okay. So I guess we can say it would be monitored. As far as the removal goes, as Mr. Dagner said, maybe that's something prudent we'd put in there, that if they do vacate the property, the tanks are removed, whether above ground or underground. I would agree with that, and I think that was a good catch on his part. I do want to also offer planning a compliment on coming up with the restrictions and conditions, because I did vote for this at council, and I thought we could control it better through this process. Keep in mind, this was an M1 property. So the noise, the trucks, the air quality, whatever we've discussed tonight could have been with any business. I've spent a lot of time in industry. Could have been a metal fabricating place. Could have been a number of things. I think the fence suggestion on the south side of Opus was a good suggestion to block the lights. I did like that. I like the input and that the neighbors brought to this tonight. Again, the water, I do think we're okay with the water plan. I think we will improve on that all the way around. The property's being marketed, has been marketed for a number of years. It would be great if we could come up with a great use, but this is the product we have at hand right now. It's currently valued at $2 million, okay? Regardless of what it turns into, whether it's 12 million or 8 million, we are that much ahead. We have the property there. We are creating high-end jobs with this. These are family supporting careers. So please, I have the floor. So again, the jobs, and we can have the applicant come up as to what they pay per hour. Okay, it's better than minimum wage, I will say that. As far as 100 idling trucks, I don't know their business, but I don't foresee that. We do have restrictions in it. As far as getting hold of the zoning commissioner, we would have to negotiate the rules and make sure it's well understood with the terminal manager, with the business owners as to what to do to minimize this. They did work with the noise to try to minimize it with the dollies that move things around. So again, I applaud our planning department for getting together with the applicants to try to get these. Traffic increase. There will be a traffic increase, but keep in mind that property could have been 3 businesses with up to 300 employees in each building. You could have had any number of cars or trucks coming and going. I'm not going to speculate on the number of trips going in and out of there because I know it's going to happen. And there's no sense arguing over it. Again, the city is growing. There's an industrial park just to the south of it. There's going to be traffic on Howell Avenue either way. The impact to that traffic is going to be there. We do have the applicant paying for the improvements at the intersection at this particular time. That is another plus to the city. Again, I think these are things we can work over and work through. I don't think they're impossible to. I see you guys are all shaking your heads and you don't believe me. I get it. I understand you're impacted. But again, this impacts everybody in the city in a different way. So just happens to be in your section.
Please
of the
refrain
city.
from stop. Please refrain from yelling from the audience. We listened carefully when you made your comments, respectfully. I ask you to do the same thing when the commission members speak.
I'll answer your question, sir. I live in the 2nd District, and I've been greatly impacted by the improvements here. I can tell you right now, people in my neighborhood are not happy about the traffic situation that occurred due not only to Drexeltown Square, but to the on-off ramp on Drexel Avenue. We were greatly impacted by that. Very inconvenienced. Our neighborhood changed. Again, for the city, for the betterment of the city, it happened. So again, we've learned to deal with it and do what we have to do with it. I do think these are workable issues. We've yet to hear from the applicants regarding some of these, and I'm sure they can answer some of these questions better than I'm handling them. But again, I do think they're a legit business. Again, I don't, why they chose to come to Oak Creek in that particular property, I don't know. One alderman, I think, made a very good point at council. As properties open up, whether in the city of Franklin on 27th, on 13th, this property becomes less and less desirable to develop. And nothing's been done with it for a number of years. So again, it's one of these, the opportunity is here, so we try to make the best of it with the least amount of impact. And that's what we're trying to accomplish tonight. So with that, I'll let it go for now. Thank you.
Commissioner Siebert.
I have a question about fencing. Is the entire property going to be fenced off, or just portions of it are going to be fenced? I can't tell that from the layout.
Well, this is a preliminary plan, but I believe the intent is to have the entire property fenced, but if the applicant wants to comment on that.
I'll bring up the applicant after all the commission comments.
I'm just curious.
Yep,
if
we'll address
we're
it.
doing part of it.
Commissioner Correll?
I wasn't at the meeting the first time this went through, so I'm getting a little bit of this information for the first time. I'm not comfortable with the answers to the noise issues are probably some of my biggest concerns, the third shift issues. Dan's comments regarding what could have went there and other options. I think you could probably come up with a scenario that there's more traffic, but I don't know that there's that many more compared to the amount of trucks in traffic. So, I think the answer that the police ultimately enforce this, I just think we have bigger issues to deal with than putting something there is going to cause another problem. So I'm struggling with a couple of those issues.
Okay. Mr. Johnson.
On page 2, section G, I want to be sure that we include the intersection of Oakwood and Opus for the signals as well.
Yes, I apologize, you did mention that before.
That was it.
That's just a mistake, omission? Okay. Oakwood and Opus. Anything else? Other questions or comments? Mr. Chandler?
I have a question about the noise. Can you review the noise abatement plan?
We have not received a formal noise abatement plan. If you have questions about what the applicant wishes to do in terms of addressing noise, I would refer to them.
Okay. Applicant, would you like to come up and address some of those? Okay, Alderman Guzikowski, then come up.
I'll just say real quick, I still feel, as I did last time we voted, this is a great company. It's just the wrong location. And while I wasn't for it before, the tanks and the traffic are really actually going to really solidify being opposed to it again. So I value the friendship with FedEx. I just don't think this is the right spot in this city.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the Plan Commission. I'm Brian Randall, attorney with Freebird Finnerty and St. John, here on behalf of the developer. I did have a slideshow that I can address some of the questions And we also had, notwithstanding that I think it was about a 9-page document that I agree, staff did a great job putting together. We had maybe 2 or 3 requested changes. So if I can try and get handshaking here.
Get that in there or no? Can we see the slideshow? Oh, you have it? Okay, well, go ahead. Kids?
Those are my boys. They better be in bed right now. Trying to do slideshow here. There we go. And if you don't mind, if I can just sit down to do this. Introductions, I told you who I am. Dave Nelson, right here in the blue shirt. Dave is with Rudabush Development. I put all the names up here because I recognize some of you, I was not here on November 22nd when this first was at Plan Commission. At Common Council in January, we had Trina Murphy and James Wynn from FedEx Freight available, and Mike Bauer and Brian Rollins from Fisher, which is the master developer. But back in November, Carl Rudabush and Dave Nelson presented on the project. So just wanted to kind of give you a sense of continuity of the names and those parties who are involved with a major project, which this is, and trying to make sure we pay attention to all the details. This I'm just going to pause briefly at. This is our landscaping plan, and I know Carrie had the site plan, which is more of a black and white, and I can come back to this. I just wanted to kind of orient real quickly that as we've gone through the process, which is typical for projects like this, start with the very big picture, conditional use permit. Now we're at conditions and restrictions, and we recognize we still need to do site and building plan application. Site plan particularly will focus on landscaping, but we're already addressing a number of those requirements. We have landscaping, and it looks small on this, but please remember we're a 48-acre site. So we do have, I lost my cursor, here it is, landscaping will be on the perimeters. We have the large wetlands in the middle that we are maintaining and preserving, and so we are essentially embracing that as a feature of the site, which helps us with some of our spacing. We have in the far southwest corner the newly installed stormwater detention facility, which will accommodate all of our on-site stormwater, which is a requirement to develop this site. So I know there were some questions about what's going on or what did go on when the road went in, and we were not the developer of that, but what we will take care of is piping and making sure we accommodate and handle all of our stormwater on-site as is required by code. I didn't want to overlook in the far northwest corner is another wetlands area. Again, we're staying out of that and really able to accommodate those natural features on site. One other point of orientation, the main terminal building is here in red, and that's our essential phase 1. This area, and if I were to zoom in, it would say that's the future build out. That would be at such time as we would add the additional building to that location. And likewise, in the southwest corner, this kind of green area that'll start off as a seeded grass area, but at the full build out, that's where, and my cursor keeps disappearing here, but that's where we would ultimately have additional parking, which is what's shown. I think since the November 22nd meeting, we did accommodate at staff's request the emergency access or fire department access, however you want to label it. Most importantly, the FedEx trucks, the employees will not be going through that particular access point. It's only emergency only. I will quickly point out that we do propose to have fencing all around the site. Dave, is that what's in red on this? It's kind of a faint color. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we will have, because of the operations and the contents, we have freight that's coming and going. We have a number of important pieces of equipment, high value dollar items. We do propose to have the entire property with a fence all around for safety and mainly security, and I'll talk about the fencing in just a moment. As it relates to, and as long as this is up, I'll talk about what I heard one of the neighbors talk about is the lights that would be coming. This is our main access point in and out of the site to Opus Drive, circling around. And I go up north a fair amount on I-41. I'm familiar over by the Quad Graphics plant. There's this road that kind of turns with railroad tracks, and there's this wooden fence, and I've always noticed it for about 20 years. I think that's kind of what the gentleman is talking about, that might it be appropriate to have some kind of wooden slat fence, whatever the feet in height would be. We would be amenable to doing that. We also, and we'd want to work with staff on this, we actually own as part of, or we're going to be owning as part of the acquisition, 1 foot, my understanding is 1 foot of land on the south side of Opus Drive. So we own, of course, everything north of Opus, but then there's Opus, that's the city street, but we actually have, by way of the property lines, 1 foot on that side, so we might even be able to accommodate the fence on our property, or we can coordinate with neighbors. But I think whatever that would be, 60 feet or something, we have one affected property here, maybe this one a little bit, makes sense to me. So if that's something the commission's looking for, I think we can accommodate that. I didn't really follow over by the cemetery and what was going on there, but I can have
As a
more
caretaker,
detail.
I'd love to have a nice new wooden fence along that border there. Just kidding.
Okay. So those are some things I wanted to briefly address on the site plan. Again, we can go back to it. The only issues that we wanted to address, and I tried to follow along with the page and the reference, Section 3, letter L on page 3 is the reference for the truck traffic regulations, and it's still somewhat small, but this is a Google Earth picture, so the cornfields, I drove it today. I should have taken out my phone at this location, but the cornfields aren't there, but we do have a truck route.
Please, don't yell from the audience.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have a truck route going eastbound as a required sign right there, and no through trucking, and weight limit of 3 ton. I don't know why he keeps doing that. Weight limit of 3 tons going westbound. So what our request is simply, and as I've done in strikeout, striking the entire second sentence and relying instead on the readily visible and publicly posted traffic signs, because of the potential, if Oakwood Road someday is expanded, if conditions change, property owners may sell their properties and other development may occur, we'll have this 2017 condition on page 3 that is set in stone, and we think the better practice is relying on the publicly posted no trucking routes. And the reason I think that's a reasonable and good reliance is that this facility will be all owner-driven vehicles. These will all be FedEx Freight marked trucks and trailers, visible to everyone, and enforcement, it's going to be, we better beware, because if we're going the wrong way, there will be calls, there's no doubt, and we don't want to play it by enforcement. But it's not like we're a grocery store and we would be saying, well, that was the butternut bread guy, that was the Coke driver, it wasn't us. These will all be
None of those
FedEx.
vehicles can go westbound on Oakwood, correct?
That's my understanding. That's what the no trucking signage is. So we would be abiding by law. Our drivers would have those instructions, and we'd be readily visible as FedEx Freight. Again, it's a belt and suspenders, what staff added. I can see why they added it. It's to protect the neighbors. What we're concerned about is just simply the future and then having to somehow reopen a conditional use if conditions change. And we think the better enforcement is by the traffic enforcement.
I'm just going to interrupt you for a second. Doug Seymour.
If I may, I think that restriction is entirely appropriate, and should the situation change to the extent that Oakwood Road is further improved and would allow for those types of vehicles to use it, then I think it would be appropriate for you or your client to come back and open up the conditional use permit and lift that restriction. I have no problem at all with maintaining that restriction in there. I think it puts your client's employees on notice rather than just saying, well, obey the signs.
It's a hard no.
I guess I didn't even go to this slide, but at Oakwood going west, there's the trucking to Opus Drive only truck route. So it's in pretty plain sight. Page 4, VE, is the screening of loading docks. And to be honest, as much as we've been able to work very closely with staff, we haven't actually corresponded on some of these fine details, but we just wanted to make sure that the types of screening that we're showing already on our landscaping plan and what our site conditions allow, this is the area of the site that is actually rather low, looking to the northwest. That we're accommodating what is intended. And so I've added some proposed words in blue that whatever our screening of those loading docks will be, it's similar to like-kind buildings, and of course it would be as approved by the Plan Commission. This is Opus Drive and the view of the street. We'll be enhancing that with landscaping. The trees will obviously grow. This is more of a bird's eye, so you of course can see where our loading docks, but that is what this facility is. It's all doors. I'll show that in a minute.
So where's the orientation point from this view from the bottom right of the picture?
This is where Opus Drive turns to the west.
Okay, coming off Oakwood, Opus Drive.
Correct.
Okay.
And then, so right here, I should use my cursor. This is our main driveway entrance. There's the turnaround cul-de-sac, and of course, the road will continue to our maintenance shop in the future.
What's the proposed height of the trees when they're planted?
Dave, has the landscapers spec'd that out? Why don't you come up to the mic just so they can have you on the record?
Yeah, I think the ordinance is pretty specific about the size of the trees that are required, and we'd be following ordinances.
Any idea what that would be? Just give me a ballpark.
Well, I guess I would defer, I would ask the applicant, the client, what type of screening at planting height would you feel would be appropriate? Because typically our landscaping standards are designed for more commercial uses where we don't have
You're not trying to
a
block
specific need to instantly screen a significant portion of a building or parking area. So to rely on the existing standards would not be adequate at this point. We'd be looking for substantially over and above what the standard is.
So whatever the height of a headlight is, the trees that you plant should, when they're planted, should already obscure those lights, and then they would grow bigger. Obviously, you have to space them accordingly. That's what we'd be looking for.
And we appreciate that. We know that we're at this middle point where site and building plan will have to specify that, so we're mindful of what those requirements are. I looked at the GE Healthcare today, and they certainly have some nice looking evergreens at their loading dock area and Yashikawa next door. So we will be mindful of what that area is and provide that plan appropriately. So we think we're on the right track. We're going to comply with code. We just wanted to make sure that and I think Carrie mentioned this, that these would be site and building plan detailed requirements. And so that's why we just provided the language that gives us some assurance that it's similar to the like-kind buildings in the area that the city has approved elsewhere.
If you accomplish what's shown in the image, I think we would all be happy. Or happier, I should say.
And that's why the landscaper drew this plan, not to make you happy, but to show what we would be proposing.
Got it.
This is
I have
again.
a question.
Commissioner Chandler?
So what does that statement mean? What does similar to like kind buildings, what does that mean exactly?
It means a reasonably acceptable standard to similar facilities. In other words, we don't want to have an unreasonably high burden to meet for our facility that the city has never before imposed on anyone else, with many nearby examples with loading docks and trucking.
I guess I'm unclear because we're talking about screening and you're saying other means similar to like kind buildings. I'm still unclear.
The qualifier, and maybe it's the bad location of the sentence, or of that word, that phrase in the sentence. It's simply to say we are willing and more than and happy to accommodate landscaping, berming, fencing, anything else that might be appropriate that would be similar for effective techniques that the city has used in M1 districts in areas that do abut nearby residential on a site such as this. So it's simply a qualifier to make it what's fair. It's the equal protection clause, if you will, if I can put the lawyer's hat on for a minute.
I guess I'm unclear because the regulations we're writing are based on our standards, aren't they?
They are,
So
but
I'm
it's
not clear.
sometimes we'll propose above and beyond. What we're trying to do is remain equal to similar like businesses.
We usually go above and beyond because there's a need. So to have that statement in there saying if there's a need to go above and beyond, they're not willing to do that.
They're not saying they're not willing to do that. They're saying they shouldn't be held to a standard that's unreasonable compared to other times we've asked like buildings, similar uses to screen. That's what they're saying, right?
Correct.
All right.
Mayor?
Yes.
We've
Commissioner
made,
Corral.
we've made it clear that this isn't something that we see in a lot of other situations, and that our expectations is it is a higher standard than we put in, and certainly much, much higher than code, as Doug alluded to.
I think our position's clear on it.
And I'll give an example of, in a minute, on kind of where the bar is being set higher. This is simply, it looks almost like Greek at the top, but this is a reference to the document with respect to design. And it's simply to let you know, full disclosure, because I know last summer I was here on a self-storage project seeking a deviation from that 75% standard. With the number of dock doors that we have, and they are metal, we are not going to make 75% as per the code written. So we are at site and building plan stage going to bring forth an office building that will be my version, or my word is the premium materials. But as we go into the loading dock areas, and that's kind of captured, it's again a small picture here, but we have glazing, we have the precast, the concrete, the premium materials on the office building portion. But as we get to the rest of the facility, there are a lot of dock doors, and so we're going to be coming back to that. And we don't, I think, need to deal with that tonight, but just as a placeholder. Roman 8, letter I, 3, page 7, references security fences and associated gates. This is an example where staff's proposal is that we shall not incorporate barbed wire. Code does allow barbed wire in certain locations, and we are in the M1 district. I believe code precludes it adjacent to residential. So we would ask for the ability to put barbed wire if that's what we ultimately choose, and we'll put that on our next plan with the exclusion of adjacent to residential. We think that's a reasonable restriction, and it comes out of code. So again, this would be an example of where the standard that was proposed in draft form is higher than what code is. We are happy to comply with code, and we'd like the option to do barbed wire on 3 sides, and we can bring up the site plan if needed. So the blue text is what we're requesting be added. And again, the importance of that is we're not putting barbed wire against the residential. The next two, there's blue text, and frankly, and Carrie can say whether it's necessary or not, but the original phrase says outdoor storage shall be limited to dolly equipment in designated parking places. And then X, Roman 10C, also references only dolly equipment. However, earlier in the document at section Roman 3A, page 2, does talk about trailer, tractor, truck, maintenance vehicle, and dolly equipment. That's, I just copied and pasted. I would be more comfortable if we're acknowledging, because we are telling you we will have trailers, tractors, the maintenance vehicles, and the dolly equipment stored outdoors. And so we just want to make sure that we're being totally clear, and we think that would be a good addition. Most importantly, what we're not doing, we don't have pipe racking systems, we don't have stockpiles, we don't have shipping containers, we don't have open containers. That's not at all what we're storing outside, but we will have trailers, tractors, maintenance vehicles, trucks, and the dolly equipment.
So is staff comfortable that, as the applicant says, this is consistent with the language that's earlier? Are you guys comfortable with that?
One thing I would note is that, and I agree, the language regarding the types of vehicles and trailers and equipment to be included is consistent with the original proposal. We would like more clarity and certainty as to which areas are going to be storing which types of vehicles and equipment, so that we don't wake up one day 5 years from now and see truck trailers all over the place where they were only designated in one certain area by the site plan. So if you're going to be parking trailers there, designated as trailers, and only park trailers there. If you're going to be parking dollies, designated and only park dollies there.
So specific parts of the site, would you be willing to designate it as an area where we would have trailers and tractors, the maintenance vehicles? They might move around, but would they be in a specific place? Would you be willing to agree to that?
Yes, we'll work with staff on that, because my understanding is FedEx Freight very much has a prescriptive plan and protocol. I mean, they do not have a haphazard yard. It's for their own efficient operations, and we will be able to work with staff and on the next site plan designating where tractor trailers and the dollies and all that can be. We'd be happy to do that.
The next one's similar, right?
Yes, it's adding the same phrase to both of those areas. And again, it is earlier in the document, and it's what we intend to do. We just, and staff may say that the provisions of the zoning code don't require all, they know that this type of facility will have trucks and tractor trailers, but maybe not dolly equipment. That may have been the new thing, so that's why it was really drafted that way. We just want to make sure it's inclusive all the way around. And that's all that we had. I'll put the site plan back up if we need to go back to anything. A few final things. I did talk about the fence. We'd be amenable to adding a wooden fence and make that for privacy and for the southern side of Opus. And we can add that to the next plan as we go forward. And I'm mindful when I ask for these changes, again, staff did a great job, and I think they're anticipating the issues, and we've heard from the neighbors a couple of times on what to address. But we are willing to, and we are accepting of the idling restrictions that are in this document. FedEx Freight has reviewed those, and
Which our staff worked out with the applicant.
did you work with anyone directly at FedEx Freight on that?
I have not had any contact with anybody directly from FedEx Freight. So no, actually, this was a recommendation. This was taken from other states and municipalities who have idling laws, as Wisconsin does not have one that I could draw from.
As you know, things are very busy in the city of Oak Creek, and your staff is very busy, and that's a good thing. They were kind enough to share this as a draft with us, and for our team to review it, send it to FedEx, and we never had that back and forth dialogue, notwithstanding a number of efforts, and Carrie and I probably shouldn't add up the number of calls and emails. But on for example, the idling, FedEx Freight can and will comply with that. In fact, they might even be more restrictive in some of that, but it's very accurate as far as when idling might be needed for diagnostic testing, for defrosting a windshield and things of that nature. So we're able to accommodate that. We're not going to have outdoor paging systems. The backup alarms are only on what are called the hostlers. Those are the yard trucks that there are 8 to 10 of those. The regular road trucks will not have backup alarms. So a lot of what is in this document we can and we will comply with, and that's why the couple of things that we pointed out we've requested to make changes, because we know what our operations are going to be and we know what we'll need to responsibly and effectively operate here in Oak Creek. With that, the other thing I wanted to mention is, and I've talked to Alderman Gale about this earlier, we're mindful that the neighbors have a lot of questions. I certainly know there are more people here than actually spoke, that we were contemplating having an open house, a neighborhood meeting, if you will, on Monday the 27th, if we can use this room or any of the City Hall facilities. We want to be as accommodating and as willing to answer the questions as we can, knowing that the Common Council return date was March 7th. We wanted to do it before then. We couldn't squeeze it in for this meeting, but we'd be happy to have our team have the FedEx personnel here and answer questions. So with Alderman Gale's coordination and cooperation, we'll put the word out, but I was thinking 6 to 8 p.m. on that particular night as again, part of becoming neighbors with the residents who are already there.
Okay, we'll see if we can facilitate that, obviously depending on the availability of the rooms and stuff.
Mr. Mayor, the last thing I just wrote down, removal of tanks, and I very much appreciate the questions and the conversation about tanks. We will have, as a subcontractor, a certified entity that will install the tanks. They are right in this location, so it'll be a licensed certified contractor that installs them. We will have the maintenance and testing obligations. The lease that is being signed for this one is a 15-year lease with 2 5-year extensions, I believe. It's fully expected this will be a 25-year facility, and those tanks will have to be maintained and have to be inspected. I don't think it's unreasonable. The idea, as I understood it, was to put some kind of removal of tanks if the facility ever goes dark. I think maybe that would be something that we could work with staff on. I would like to have some qualifiers as far as if the tanks are drained and there aren't any contaminations issues, and FedEx has left in 25 years, why remove them if maybe the next user could use them? So we'd want some qualifiers that removal of tanks if certain conditions are met. And so if the commission is interested in that, we can work with staff on that. Otherwise, to know that you're getting an A-grade tenant here and a first-rate operator of the facility, and for their own interest to keep their trucks away from all the fueling stations nearby, they're going to have their own on-site.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the commission that weren't answered in that presentation? Commissioner Chandler?
Still a question about the noise. Can you provide information on how you would eliminate noise abatement, any studies, any items in place that would minimize the noise?
If we don't have studies on that, do we?
Not currently. Not currently, no.
So we don't have a study per se, but once again, we have a 48-acre site, which is fairly sizable. We have the focus of the operations is at the terminal area, and yes, there'll be movement throughout the yard with the vehicles. And frankly, I can kind of speak to what Doug was looking for earlier. The employee lot is right here. That's why we have the interior parking lot landscaping. So this will be one car in, one car out. Those are the inbound trips for the employees. And so there's not a lot of activity in that lot other than when employees arrive. This, and again, it's shielded by the landscaping. This is where the trucks will be parking, correct? Yes. Correct. So the trucks will have activity right here at the corner, but again, it's right adjacent to the street. And they will be moving to the loading docks to pick up their trailers that are all backed into all along these loading dock areas. And the trailers, when they're not in use, they're parked along the perimeter here on the far north and far west against the railroad tracks. And I think the dollies, and again, we'll put this better on the site plan and I'll be more versed in that, but I believe the dollies are in areas like this and here in the middle. But we'll clarify that. I just wanted to give a sense for the operations. And so to the noise question, the hostlers, I guess let me try to address it as what isn't the noise. Yes, we will have trucks starting and backing up, but they won't have the backup beeps. It's only the 8 to 10, what are called yard hostlers, that will have those backup beeps, and 2, 3, when it's busy, will be operating at one time, 1 sometimes, and very often none at a particular moment in time on the site. The maintenance yard will be simply what that is, an enclosed facility where the trucks can go in and be worked on. And the rest of the yard is logistics. It's moving the trailers around, they're loading them up here, and driving back out the facility off-site. So we have the perimeter landscaping. We have a very large site. We're trying to spread out, but also, and I know there was one viewpoint that maybe the mature tree line doesn't shield the noise. We really believe it's pretty dense and it'll shield lights and some noise to some degree. We're going to do our best. We have railroad tracks nearby. We have a state highway at 38 over on the east, and we're going to do what we can with the buffering, the landscaping, and the spacing to be as accommodating as we can.
Thank you.
Commissioner Krell.
Do we have any percentage of breakdown? We've got obviously 3 shifts. I'm struggling with the 3rd shift compared to what other uses maybe wouldn't go there. The amount of traffic generated by the 3rd shift, whether it be from the employee numbers, 1st, 2nd, 3rd shift, or from the truck traffic when FedEx has it coming in and out.
We do, and I'm not going to be as polished as I could be, and maybe we were at council, but in the very first plan commission packet, there was an attachment A, a schedule that showed the employees' arrival and departure and the trucks. So I'll try to answer that based off this. It's already in the record going back to November. But the quick answer is very minimal activity, employees arriving in the overnight hours. First and foremost, we are a 24-hour facility, but as staff has indicated, our activity is much less in those overnight hours. There are fewer employees. There are 6 arriving at 1 to 2 a.m. So out of a facility that has 192 employees, that's just 6 that are arriving at that time for their reported shift. The peak of the arrivals is, I think, what many of us are accustomed to, which is the 7 to 8 o'clock, the morning arrival for an 8-hour day, and the peak departure are 1600 to 1700, so that's 4 to 5 p.m. and thereafter. One person is leaving at 11 a.m. or 11 p.m. to midnight. Likewise, the truck traffic is very minimal. We're showing a 1 truck as a departure in the 3 to 4 a.m. hour, and then we have them ramping up at 7 to 8 o'clock, 43 total trips, 59 from 8 to 9 o'clock. And so it's going to be a typical work day, which we hope is compatible with what the nearby neighbors are experiencing. When they're sleeping, the usage is much less. When most people are awake, that's when we're a little more active as well.
I appreciate that. I did miss the first meeting, so I appreciate you going back.
No problem. I just wanted to make the point that it was in the record all along, and we're happy to divulge that and go into those details. Thank you.
Alderman Gale, did you want to add something?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to follow on some comments Brian made about the conversations I've been sharing with Carrie and Doug. The intersection at Opus and Oakwood will be a significant point of evaluation. Their own TIA says that at some points in the near future, or not near future, at build-out, that will operate with unacceptable delays and will likely require signalization. So someone's going to pay for that. I think Jerry Franke and Wispark would argue they've put their money in already. So that's something we're going to have to really sit down and evaluate who and how that's going to be, if in fact this project moves forward as it is, how that's going to be escrowed and paid for.
Mr. Johnson?
That is intended to be included as part of the development agreement for this site, that signal is covered with this development.
Okay.
Is that the applicant's understanding?
We've read the same TIA and we're aware of what the requirements are. There are trigger points going forward, and I know that the southern development will, if all goes well, I know that's what the city wants, there will be more traffic. So whatever those benchmarks are and the responsibility, we will work through that.
Well, just to be clear, the responsibility as per the CUP, if it's approved by the council, will be on your client.
Pretty clear. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, just to surface some of the other things that Carrie and I discussed, somehow we need to memorialize the fact that the county has a bike path planned on that western edge of that property. I'm not sure it's taken into account on the drawings.
Is that the Oak Leaf Trail?
Yeah, an extension of the Oak Leaf Trail. It would go north.
Where is it?
Right on the western edge of the property along the railroad tracks.
Oh, okay.
So there's, somehow we have to secure an easement or something to make sure that plan can be taken into account as we move forward. There's obviously connections need to be made for the north and to the east, but
Is that dotted line, or is that not what that is?
I think the fence line's right on the property line. Dave, is that right?
Okay.
At
Well,
least in your drawing.
Yes,
we would be looking for some future connection to the bike trail.
Yes, so we need to plan ahead for at least an easement, potentially. So we got to think about that if in fact it's going to move forward. That corner I also discussed with Carrie, I think from an Oakwood Road from a view standpoint, some berming right there in that corner is going to limit your view of a somewhat unsightly industrial looking parking platform, really. So I think you could really, with not all that high, because the elevation there is fairly high already, you could do a little bit of a 10-foot berm, and you could really limit the sight line from Oakview, and visibility would be, I think, significantly improved, in fact, if that came to pass. We have discussed in the past, and I'm not sure if it's going to be a point of contention or a point of reference, the applicant at some point in the past had suggested dealing with the light issue into the residence, potentially moving that entry point to the far eastern corner of the property, and they potentially would abandon the Opus Drive to the west. So that's something I guess we can memorialize and discuss.
And the applicant has said tonight that they would be willing, if they kept the current location of that exit, they would shield that with fencing, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, because you can see lighting through that, and that's on the Joy Global property. So obviously with trucks coming in, it's going to be amplified. And on Commissioner Carell's commentary, there are opportunity costs for this project. As I said, we have to pay for these improvements that are going to be required. This thing is a low-value project. We have an obligation as elected officials to manage for best and greatest use of the properties. Doug will tell you that there's merely a handful of properties in the city that are this size zoned for this use. And that's a build-out. So that's 20, 30, 40 years from now. We got to make sure we're using our best discretion to get the best use out of the land we have available under these zoning codes. So that'd be my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
Questions for Alderman Gale, or general questions or comments? Commissioner Chandler?
I have another question for the applicant. Just for clarity, so section or Roman numeral 8, item I-3. So you added a statement adjacent to the residence area with the barbed wire. So is there intent to add barbed wire somewhere?
Likely, yes. I guess at this point, we'd like to have the option to do so because code allows it. So the sentence would read, security fences and associated gates, number 3, shall not incorporate barbed wire adjacent to residential, meaning that the areas in this location would not be barbed wire. Sorry for my fat finger there, but along the railroad tracks where who knows who's walking over there, we'd like to have the option to do that, and along here and the backside, which I think is also M1 zoning or it's future planned for industrial. And likewise, the east property line is where we do not abut residential, and we'd like the option to consider that, and we would show it on our future plans that would be presented at site and building plan approval.
So Carrie, is that per code that barbed wire is acceptable?
There is a section of code that does mention barbed wire allowed in the M1 district. We've been discouraging it wherever possible, though.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Motion on 4F.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to
Go
add
ahead.
one more thing. When we were discussing about the concerns with regard to who's going to inspect, who's going to, follow up on these complaints, perhaps we should enter in, and we'd have to wordsmith this with the city attorney, something into the conditions and restrictions that would allow access for site inspections by staff. So I would just throw that out there for the Plan Commission's consideration and ask that you give me some feedback so that we can work with the city attorney on crafting that.
And how would we negotiate frequency or time of visit?
So those would be things
Work with
that
staff?
staff would work with the city attorney as well as the applicant on.
And specifically for noise?
I think access for any kind of inspection related to the conditional use permit.
So a agreement with staff to coordinate a schedule of sorts to monitor things like she just mentioned. Agreeable?
I believe our client would certainly be willing to discuss that and work with staff. Obviously there'll be a developer's agreement, that probably would be negotiated into that, I would think.
The answer is yes, we'd be willing to work with staff on that. And
I mean, I would show a willingness to, not only accept them now, but to work with the city on a long-term ability to monitor these things, because these folks are living out there. So we want to make sure that things like lighting or noise or backup, the trucks that back up the hostlers or whatever you call them, that all that stuff's monitored and adheres to these conditions.
Right. To the extent we can show willingness, I think we're both trying to do that. We certainly have to send that up the food chain as well. But yeah, I think that works.
Okay, Mike?
And it should be noted that the fire department does have authority to access sites and matters of public safety for inspection purposes.
Absolutely.
And I'd just like to request that the proposed changes be emailed because I did not receive those.
Noted.
Happy to.
Anyone else? Motion 4F. Go ahead, Brian Johnson.
We've got a lot of changes to this document through here. For our motion, how do you want that worded that we incorporate these changes? Is that the email from the client plus staff notes? What's going to be the best way to handle that?
I think based on the conversations that we've had, the more specific you can be in what is going to be revised or incorporated into these conditions and restrictions, the better for staff. I understand that you may not have the recollection of everything that we've discussed tonight, or perhaps the wording that was proposed by the applicant, but I would just ask that you be as specific as possible. And we do have notes.
Come back on the 28th.
Or if the Plan Commission prefers, we could come back on the 28th with revisions proposed based on the conversation had tonight.
I think it's a good idea.
I'll be here anyway, so.
Okay, so no action. You clean up the language with all of the things that the applicant has agreed to based on these conditions on the 28th.
Okay.
Okay? All right.
Thank you.
We're good? So no action on this item till the 28th. All this,
Notice goes out to everybody again.
same notice? Notice area, yeah? Okay, so same notice that you'll get for that meeting. I would note that it's on the 28th at 6 PM though, because that's when it is. All right, last item of the evening. Thanks for the great questions and comments. I appreciate your attendance. Last item is a Planning Commission discussion on potential training opportunity. Who is handling?
That's me.
Oh, hey, Carrie.
I came across a potential training regarding building materials. There was actually an in-person presentation in Colorado, and I got in touch with them, and they would be willing to come out here and do an in-person training. They can do what's called like a lunch and learn, or they could come to a plan commission meeting. Basically, what they're talking about is evolution over time of building materials and what is considered, good quality, strong things, and answer your questions about that. So if there are any, I can provide you more information on what the course was, but I just wanted to get your feedback as to whether or not you'd be interested. I think based on the conversations that we've had over the last few meetings, it might be pertinent to discuss these building materials and get some questions answered about durability and safety and things like that that have come up. So if there's no objection, I would be willing to set that up for a plan commission meeting in the future. I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to attend, so I'll send out some potential dates that we could do that if you're
Any
interested.
objections to that training?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay,
All right,
let's
thank
go
you.
ahead.
Thank you.
Set it up. Motion adjourn.
Carrillo moves to adjourn at 8:05.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Johnson, aye.
Carrillo, aye.
Gave chai.
Squeedy, yes.
Guzekowski, aye.
Corral, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Happy Valentine's Day. Have a great night. See you next Tuesday.
Yep.